So today I wanted to bring you 3 recipes. Most of them have to do with pumpkin. So we're gonna be doing roasted pumpkin seeds, pumpkin scones, and maple butter tarts. How Canadian, right? Now, to get the roasted pumpkin seeds started, you're gonna wanna preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I have just a regular carving pumpkin. I don't have a pie pumpkin. So there are other varieties of pumpkins that have a sweeter flesh that you can use for baking or making pumpkin puree. But right now I'm just using a regular pumpkin that you would find at a farm to carve. So the inside isn't going to be as sweet, and I probably wouldn't put it in a pie, but you could eat it for sure. Now, to get the seeds out, I find it easiest to actually just scoop it with a spoon, just a metal spoon, and I dump all of the inside of the pumpkin into a bowl. And once I have the pumpkin out of the way, I'm going to go back to the pumpkin guts, if you will, and separate the seeds from the rest of the insides of the pumpkin. Now, I just went ahead and gave the pumpkin seeds a bit of a rinse to get the last bit of pumpkin guts off them. And then I'm using extra virgin olive oil, just a light coating, before I season the pumpkin seeds. And here I'm just using some fresh ground salt and pepper. And then I also am going to be using some dried oregano, smoked paprika, and garlic powder and onion powder. And you're welcome to also use some cayenne powder in this, but it is totally optional. If you do, I'd recommend using about a 1/4 teaspoon. Next, you're just going to want to grab a regular baking sheet and line it with whatever you have on hand. I'm just using parchment paper here, and I'm going to try and spread the pumpkin seeds about as evenly as possible. Okay, So now we're going to start off by making the pie crust for the maple butter tarts. Now for this recipe, you're going to need some flour. I'm using just regular all-purpose flour today. You're going to want a tablespoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of butter. And the key here is you're going to want your butter to be as cold as possible. So what I like to do is actually cut the butter in cubes and then put it back in the fridge to make sure it's as cold as possible before I use it. And then you're just going to need 8 tablespoons of water. So once you've added your flour, salt, and sugar into a bowl, you're going to go ahead and add in your cold cubed butter. And if you have a pastry cutter on hand, that is amazing. Go ahead and use that to work in your butter. But if you don't, your hands will also work. And you're just going to want to break the butter into about a pea size amount, and your dough is going to look a bit crumbly at this stage. Now, once you're happy with the consistency of your dough so far, you're going to want to go ahead and start adding some water. I like to start out by adding 4 tablespoons first, and then working that into the dough, and later adding the next 4 tablespoons of water. Now you almost want to squeeze the dough with your hand, as if you were clenching your fist, and that's going to help work the butter into the flour and just get it all combined. Now you don't want to work the dough too much, so as soon as it kind of forms into a dough ball, you're going to want to stop kneading it. And I'm just going to separate this into 2 pieces. And I'm going to flatten each half and wrap it in saran wrap. You can also use a beeswax wrap if you have one. Just try and seal it as, I guess, sealed as possible to keep the dough from drying out, I guess. And once you're happy with your 2 wrapped dough balls, you're going to want to put those in the fridge. And I like to chill my dough for at least an hour, but it can be chilled for up to 2 days. So if you want to do it ahead of time, and just have the pie crust made, you can also do that. Okay, coming back to our pumpkin seeds. I've had them in the oven now for about 8 minutes, and I'm just giving them a quick flip or toss, I guess. Okay, and this is the final product. So they ended up in the oven for about 16 minutes total, but in the last few minutes they really started to crisp up. Okay, taking a break from the butter tarts to jump into some pumpkin scones. Now, these I learned how to make at the bakery, and I've kind of adjusted the recipe in my own way, and I just find these absolutely delicious to have for breakfast. They have a super nice little spice to them, and they just taste like fall. That's all I can say. So I'm just grabbing myself a tea at the moment, and I'm just getting all my ingredients assembled beforehand. So for the pumpkin scones, you're gonna need flour, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, baking powder, salt, brown sugar, 8 tablespoons of butter or 1/4 cup, 3/4 cups of pumpkin puree, and 3/4 cup of either silk half and half creamer, or you can also use almond milk or cashew milk or whatever non-dairy or dairy milk you have on hand. Now, once you have your dry ingredients combined in a bowl, you're going to want to create almost a well in the center where you're going to add in your pumpkin puree and your milk. Now, I find it easiest just to gently combine it with a spatula until it doesn't really combine anymore, and then I usually switch to using my hands. You're going to want to lightly dust either a cutting board or your countertop and just get your dough and any little bits left onto the counter. Now, the trick when working with scones is to knead the dough as little as possible. So once you have it relatively formed into a ball, you're just going to want to flatten it until about the height of your thumb. So I like to line my thumb up against the dough on the counter And once it's about as thick as my hand, I stop flattening it. And for me, I just use a mason jar to pop out these scones, but you can use a tin can, a lid, really anything you have on hand. And here I'm just gonna brush the scones with some milk and then dust them with some cinnamon sugar. Delicious.
Come on, boo. Come on, don't worry.
Okay, now to start off with the crust for our butter tarts, you're going to want to go ahead and cut one of your dough rounds in 8 pieces. So I cut it in half and then cut that in half and then so on and so on. And I'm really just winging it here. I'm trying to roll it out into, I guess, somewhat of a triangle or square. And once you're happy with your shape, you're gonna wanna just squeeze that into a greased muffin pan and just kind of fold the excess pieces of dough to make a little bit of a crust around your butter tart. And these might all look different. Mine definitely do. And then you're just going to continue rolling out each piece of dough until you're happy with that. And I just went ahead and filled a whole muffin tray. And then with the extra dough, I actually ended up making some mini apple pies. So you're welcome to continue on making extra butter tarts, or you can make something else with the extra pie dough. Whatever you feel like, really. Now, moving on to the filling for the butter tarts, you're gonna need 2 eggs, about a 1/4 cup of butter, maple syrup, and some sugar. I'll include the full recipe up here as well as down below. And I'm just using some dark brown sugar in this recipe. I find it has a much richer taste than the light brown sugar, so I prefer to use that when I have the option. And you're gonna want to just cream the butter in with the sugar, and this is actually emulsifying it. So this process you want to spend a little bit more time on. If you have a mixer or even hand beaters, I super recommend that. If you don't, you can go ahead and just use a fork like I'm doing here. It just might take you a bit more time than it would with a mixer. I find it easiest to add my eggs in one at a time, and once each egg is combined, then you're going to want to add the vanilla and maple syrup as well. And here I'm just using pure maple syrup. It's local, depending on where you are, it might be a bit more expensive to get pure maple syrup. So just find something that's in your price range. People also use corn syrup sometimes instead in replace of maple syrup. But I find maple syrup just tastes a bit better and maybe a bit better for us. I don't know. Who am I to say, right? And then I'm just gonna add a couple teaspoons of vanilla here. Move my apple pie crusts. Get the butter tarts going. And you're just going to want to pour a bit of the mixture into each cup. I tried to fill it about 3/4 of the way up of the butter tart, but some of them did get a bit fuller, or like maybe closer to half. So yeah, depends on the filling. All right, and I went ahead and added some walnuts into 6 of them. You can either add walnuts, raisins, you can add really anything, pecans, whatever your heart desires and whatever you have on hand.